at the concentration camps. And so she, that must have been pretty fascinating for her. She took a job with the Treasury Department, where she opened the first foreign office in Shanghai, in China. And it wasn't too long after that Civil War erupted, and Mao was coming down on them, and she fled with the rest of her CIA friends. Although she made it out, she always told me, on one of the last trains to leave Shanghai, and she carried with her 2 straw suitcases full of cash. And I said, "Well, it must have been a lot of money, Mama." She goes, "No, it was a lot of paper, but it wasn't worth very much." But she had a disguise, kind of a floppy hat and a veil, kind of hiding her face, and she was on the train with hundreds and hundreds of Chinese people with chickens and goats, and and they could hear a war raging around them. And if the train had stopped and Mao's soldiers had boarded, there's a good chance she would have been killed, if not raped and then killed, because it's felt that everybody that worked, Americans were all CIA people, or shouldn't be trusted, and they're probably right. So then she married a pilot who worked for the Chinese China Air, I think it was called. That didn't work out too well. He was a man of nobility, and apparently quite an alcoholic who abused her. So she left, and then met my dad in the offices of Averell Harriman, who was tied in with Skull and Bones and the Bush family. And it's funny how all these people just, I guess rats congregate. So I mean, I think that can be said quite freely these days. And then she kind of took a back seat to intelligence and became as much of a housewife and a mother as she could, at the same time working for different embassies, and always availing herself to whatever needs the CIA had to request her for photocopying or stealing sensitive documents which she had access to, and then returning them the next day after doing whatever. So she was always involved in that kind of stuff. And then, of course, by the time Watergate hit in the early 70s, she functioned as the bag woman, the liaison between the Cubans, McCord, Liddy, and my father, and the White House, picking up satchels of money and paper bags of money. And the war with Nixon started, the blackmail threats and the threats of, bringing down Nixon's presidency and blowing the White House out of the water. And, really just, she boarded the plane, and apparently she had made plans with Michelle Clark, who was the first black PBS news anchor, I believe, at the time. She had apparently made arrangements to do an extensive interview. There was also a lot of other people on that flight that had links to Watergate in one way or another. For example, there were several persons related to bribery and corruption deals with the White House. Namely, Attorney General John Mitchell was under investigation for corruptly helping the El Paso Natural Gas Company against main competitor, Northern Natural Gas. And Mitchell's decision to drop the antitrust charges was worth about $300 million to El Paso. 2 guys working for Northern Natural were on that flight and investigating Mitchell and his accepting of a bribe. Ralph Blodgett and James Kruger, and they were killed on that crash. Michelle Clark, as I mentioned, was killed on that crash. But what's even more evidence of foul play is the fact that the FBI had many agents on the scene within 15 minutes of the crash, and it was very unusual for 50 FBI agents to be amassed anywhere for an operation. So obviously they knew there was something going to happen with that plane. They had no jurisdiction in domestic air disasters. They claimed that they were there because they had evidence of sabotage and air piracy. and that gave them the authority. One of their agents went to the flight tower in Midway, where the crash occurred near, and confiscated the flight recorder tapes. The day after the crash, Nixon appointed Eagle Bud Crow to the position of Undersecretary of Transportation. Crow was my father's boss in the plumbers, and he ended up being sentenced from 2 to 6 years for his role in Watergate. The Department of Transportation oversees the NTSB, which is the sole investigating unit for the airline crashes. And this put Crow in a position not only to guide the investigation, but also to include or exclude pertinent information about the crash and keep Nixon informed. Nixon also appointed 3 months later Alexander Butterfield, another White House Nixon loyalist, to become administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration. According to the New York Times, they reported that Butterfield read all the accident reports himself and relayed the process of the investigation to Nixon. There must have been some reason why they wanted to keep very tight control of this investigation. Dwight Chapin, another Nixon deputy assistant to the president, who was convicted of perjury, he joined United Airlines shortly thereafter. Just hours after the crash, an anonymous call was made to WBBM in Chicago. The caller said he was a radio ham and had monitored ground control's communications with that flight. And he reported an exchange concerning gross control tower error or sabotage. It just goes on. I have a list of like 20 different things. The tail flight recorder stopped recording 14 minutes prior to the crash.
What, you broke up for a second there. What did the ham radio? What did the ham?
As I've said before, this should not be looked upon as anything to sully their names. The guys were killed too, as many other people were.
Wait, St. John, you broke up for a second. What did you say the ham radio operator had said?
The ham radio operator, he called in to the WBBM Chicago CBS talk show, and he said he was a radio ham operator who monitored the ground control's communications with Flight 553. He reported an exchange concerning gross control tower error or sabotage. CBS, who was Michelle Clark's employer, she was the reporter that my mother was going to talk to, kept this information from the authorities that were investigating the accidents. And as a matter of fact, against Michelle Clark's immediate family, CBS had her body cremated quickly. High levels of cyanide were found in the pilot Wendell Whitehouse's postmortem, and it was 4 times the amount that normally would have been found in the expectations of cyanide coming from such a fire. It's just, there's a letter that was written to the head of the FBI Chicago field office, asking why so many agents, how could there be so many agents? There's no obvious way such a large response of 50 agents within the hour could have been generated from a standing start as of the moment of the crash. Right. The closest FBI is 40 miles away from the crash, and never in the history of the FBI there has 50 agents been available to do anything. When you consider a very obvious intelligence leak, Hungarian freedom fighter Laszlo Hedek died in a crash the next summer in Boston, leaving a trail of secret NATO nuclear documents strewn down the center of the runway, and the FBI was barely able to get a solitary agent to the scene on the same day as the wreck. And this is the same FBI that got 50 agents to the scene within, less than 30 minutes. It's very, very suspicious. It just needs to be looked into by people that know how to do that kind of thing, But I wanted to get this story out because, out of respect for my mother, and also, to remind people that that this was a heinous crime, and it needs to be. Everybody's dead, I'm sure, that was involved in it, but it needs to be investigated.
How many other people died in the crash?
I'd like some answers. I don't know that I ever will, but...
How many other people died in the crash?
Let's see. There was... here it is. I have a list right here. There was quite a few... 50-some, I think, died in the crash. And there was an injured list of survivors of maybe 20. And there was two houses that were completely pancaked.
Oh, really?
And the people in those houses died as well.
That's interesting, because if you said it was a control tower error, that means that they forced that plane to fly into those houses too. No, I got a quick.
I think someone brought that plane down on purpose, and I don't think it was intending to bring it down in a residential neighborhood, but they certainly wasn't going to let that plane land and have the threat of against Nixon follow through, because Michelle Clark and Dorothy Hunt were meeting for an interview that was going to open up Watergate as never before. And this is, of course, before Woodward and Bernstein got their book out, and before Watergate was really exploding in the press. I mean, there's still a lot of things that Nixon nobody knew that he was involved in. He was getting money from the mob to pay off my dad, and he feared my dad because my dad had evidence linking him to what Nixon felt was the Cuban assassins that Nixon acted as liaison between the White House and Operation 40, which was the team of trained CIA mercenary and assassins, some of which Felix Rodriguez was in that, Tosh Plumlee. I know both those guys. And there was quite a few more, and these guys were charged with taking care of the dirtiest work to the CIA. And Nixon knew about it. He knew about he approved the assassination attempt on Fidel Castro for years. And Nixon felt that Hunt obviously had evidence. If this was going to come out now, Nixon was done for. That was it, and so that's one of the reasons he feared my dad so much. The other was because people in the White House regarded my dad as a very, very serious guy. If he wasn't able to, to take care of a hit himself, he knew people that did that kind of thing, and they did it just on his word alone. So, he was kind of in awe, and they were kind of in fear of him, but in awe of him at the same time. That's why Nixon picked him to run the internal White House investigation unit. As I said, they'd met some years before, and Nixon, on and off, had kept track of my dad's career. He was, part of the overthrow of the Guatemalan government, and he worked in the Bay of Pigs. He trained the Brigade 2506, and best friend Manuel Artime, a dear family friend of ours, was handpicked by my dad and approved by Robert Kennedy to become Cuba's next president once Castro was murdered and Cuba was retaken. But of course that never happened, and my dad was bitter about that his whole life because he lost a lot of comrades, and he realized that Kennedy had to go. So a lot of people had different reasons, just not one reason and not one faction that wanted Kennedy gone. It was just about everybody except the public.
St. John, we got about a minute and a half, okay, and then I'm going to drop one station. But I have another hour after this. Can you stay for like another half hour if you want?
I can, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. But we're going to be dropping one station in about a minute and a half. So why don't you plug your book and the upcoming event you have and any kind of website or anything you have?
Pardon me, my website is stjohnhunt.com. SAINTJOHNHUNT.com. That'll guide you to my new website, which is .net. You can go to either one. But I've just been building the first website I've ever built. Just built it. It's got music, too, little videos I put together, some stuff I wrote and recorded with different bands I've been in that I've been leader to over the years.
Yeah, that's cool, because you're a musician, too. And you also, don't you sell guitars?
No.
No.
No, I mean, I don't sell guitars. That's like selling people, man. You can't sell guitars.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, with St. John Hunt, we're going to say goodnight to PSN Radio, but we're still going to be on the Awake Network and, of course, Spreaker and iHeart and all that kind of stuff. The book is Dorothy, an Amoral, Dangerous Woman, the Murder of E. Howard Hunt's Wife. Watergate's